Good evening. It's my pleasure to welcome you at our virtual lab space and our online BlockchainLab Drenthe meetup. My name is Adrie Wisman, and together with two other speakers, we will try to make this event interesting and informative for you. This meetup is in English because we have some international guests, attendees from Germany, Belgium, England. We will interact with you in the chat window, which you can see here next to the live stream. People who are watching full screen have to switch to a smaller size to see the chat window. You just have to use a mail address to log in, and it might be a good start to type in your name and where you live so everybody can see who is present. I've seen some people from Edinburgh. I've seen some people from Groningen, Oldenburg University. Ali, nice that you're here. Just a short introduction for the people who are here for the first time. We are a spin-off from BlockchainLab Drenthe Foundation. In Dutch, that's called a stichting, which goal it is to spread knowledge about blockchain, distributed ledgers, cryptos, etc. So we inform students, companies, governmental bodies, but also private persons. We are involved in an international project called Interreg Bling, Blockchain in Government, in which we cooperate with 13 partners from 7 countries around the North Sea. We are commissioned by the province of Drenthe to do research and development in the field of blockchain for the Bling project. And later on I will show you an animation film of the project we are currently working on, which is called Self-Sovereign Attendancy. We talked about that on earlier occasions, but now we have a nice animation film which we can show you. We have a number of interesting topics, and like I already told you, 2 speakers. First, Jeroen Wester will kick off with what is going on in BlockchainLand, and I have a, let me see, an agenda where I can show you this. So Jeroen is going to tell what is new in BlockchainLand. Then I will show you the animation film from our Self-Sovereign Attendancy project. I will do a lecture about encryption. And Chailin Lim is going to talk about Serey and freedom of speech and blockchain. So I think it's going to be an interesting few hours. Let me give you some last instructions. I see many of you already found the chat window. There you can type in your questions you have for the speakers. We will be monitoring that chat, and I will try to get the speakers to answer all these beautiful questions. And hopefully we'll get some discussion. So let me put the first speaker on the screen, Jeroen Wester. And Jeroen is one of my board members in BlockchainLab. Well, please Jeroen, introduce yourself and take it away.
Okay, thank you, Adrie. Well, my name is Jeroen Wester. Co-founder of the BlockchainLab Drenthe and long-time presenter in these meetups also, with the intention to keep on going. But I will rush you through some slides about what's going on in BlockchainLand. So Adrie, can we skip to the next slide?
Done.
Okay. Usually we begin this overview of what's going on in BlockchainLand with a overview of the total market capitalization of cryptocurrencies. Usually the story is usually done by Adrie, so I'm taking over from him. What's going on here? Well, let's see. Total market capitalization of crypto coins at the time is now 250 billion US dollars. Which is an enormous amount, of course, but when you look very sharply, it isn't that large. It's about a third of what it used to be in January 2018, the third. When we look at the coins, then we see that Bitcoin is, as always, the biggest share of all the crypto coins there. It's 65%. And number two, Ethereum only takes 8%. And then when you go down the list, there are a lot of coins that take an even smaller share of this big pie. Okay, I'll read next slide, please. One of the things that we had a close watch on was what was going on, what was the impact of the Corona crisis on the total market capitalization of crypto coins. And there were some expectations. One of the expectations was, okay, stock markets go down in this crisis, crypto could go up. Well, that isn't what really happened. In March, with the outbreak in full-fledged, the total market capitalization went down from around 250 to 150 billion US dollars. And from that point on, it gradually went up. Well, now it's May and it's again 250 billion US dollars. So it shows some resilience. It's back to the levels of 2019. So crypto wasn't the big new gold in this Corona crisis, but it's also not the new low. It's more or less the same. Maybe this is good news. It is kind of stable. Next topic. On the next slide is Bitcoin halving. This is an interesting topic for people who are a long-time watcher of Bitcoin news, cryptocurrency news. Many of you know that Bitcoin is by design restricted to a certain amount of Bitcoins that will be available in the network. But every Bitcoin needs to be mined. They are not given away, they need to be mined. And mining means solving complicated puzzles. And when you have done that, and then you are a miner when you do something like that, then you will get Bitcoin. That's what people around the world do. Now, by design, there's a different thing happening. When you would mine a Bitcoin, then your reward was higher than it is now. Before May, you would get 12.5 Bitcoin for every block that you mined. But now, by design, the 2.5 Bitcoin is reduced to 6.25 Bitcoin. So miners, by mining a block, their reward is decreased. Now, why is this, you could say? Why is there some kind of miner reward inflation built into this network? Cannot answer that question at the time, but it would be interesting to dive in it. But it is something that is in the design of the Bitcoin network. The halving, the Bitcoin halving, is interesting because people that have a close watch on what's happening with the Bitcoin price want to know what will happen. Okay, this halving takes place. Will the price of Bitcoin go up or go down? And the other thing that's very interesting is what will happen in relation to the Bitcoin halving with the stability of the Bitcoin network. For instance, by reducing the reward for miners, will miners turn their equipment off? Well, okay, these are very interesting questions. What happened? Well, we go to the next slide. And there you see that the halving took place on Monday, May 11th, somewhere in the evening. And what happened is, I don't know if it's really expected, but before Monday, May the 11th, the price went up. But also before May the 11th, the price went down. So there was a rally and there was a crash. So people expected, okay, it's good to buy Bitcoin, so the price went up. But just right before the halving took place, then the price went down, so people started selling Bitcoins. After the halving, so after May 11, the price gradually went up and is back on the same level. So from a Bitcoin perspective, looking at this window in May, you could say, okay, the price went up, went down. Well, that's more or less the same behavior. That's what happens all the time. So there is no, I cannot say, okay, the halving resulted in a price up or price down movement. That's maybe too soon. What happened to the stability of the Bitcoin network? That's also too soon to measure, but it looks good at the moment. Okay, last topic is about Facebook. Some time ago, Facebook launched their own cryptocurrency called Libra. A lot of attention in the world, a lot of protest against it. Large banks, large national banks say, okay, we don't want that. You tech giants, you have enough power, so please stay away with this new money that you will introduce. So the Libra project wasn't received very well. But it's still a very interesting thing from a technological perspective, but also from a social perspective or financial perspective. It doesn't happen. The Libra project doesn't take place in the way or with the feeling that Facebook would like to go with it. But it's still an interesting project. When they introduced Libra, they also introduced a wallet called Calibra. Now that wallet is last week rebranded to Novi. And well, okay, is that news? Okay, there's a new name. The real news was a bit under the hood, that we can see that there's now not only one Libra coin that can be stored in this Novi wallet, but there are multiple stable coins like a Libra Euro or a Libra British Pound, a Libra US dollar. So all these coins can be stored in this Novi wallet. And this Novi wallet is then connected to WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger, and you can do payments with it. At least that's the idea. Well, what does Facebook try to do with this movement? It looks like they want to have a little bit more distance between Facebook and the Libra Association, so that people using these cryptocurrencies do not feel that they are immediately selling their soul to Facebook, but they're using money for their own good. Okay, that's what it is for now. So I will go back to, I will give it back to Adrie.
We've been working on a special project. It's called Self-Sovereign Attendancy. And it involves a phone where you have a wallet with all kinds of events. We just presented it and at the Bling conference. And we have an animation film, and I'm going to show you that. And let me see if I can get that here. I have to press a few buttons. Here we go.
Sometimes attendees need to prove to verifiers that they attended an event, course, or conference. For example, for accreditation of medical personnel, accountants, financial specialists, students, and everyone who must prove personal education points. Event organizers like to use attendance sheets or pictures to register attendancy. GDPR law makes these sheets hard to use. BlockchainLab researched how to make registration GDPR proof. Is it possible to show tamper-free proof of attendancy? Can verifiers trust the attendee? Can verifiers be sure that the attendees listed were really at the event and worked out a solution? How our blockchain solution works. decentralized, transparent, immutable, and cryptographically safe sharing of data on a need-to-know basis. Step 1. Event organizer, Isaac, registers an event on the blockchain and creates a unique event key. Step 2. A. The phone of the attendee, Harry, picks up the Bluetooth key at the event or the QR code for an online event. B. Generates a unique key. C. Uses it to access the blockchain. D. Register and store a certificate locally on Harry's phone. Step 3. The organizer closes the event to prevent misuse. Step 4. With the event wallet on his phone, Harry is able to verify 24/7 that he was present at a certain event, date, time, location without revealing his identity details. Step 5. The verifier, Victor, can test the validity of event attendancy on the blockchain without having access to attendee Harry's identity details. A blockchain solution with maximum transparency while retaining maximum privacy.
Okay, so I hope you understood what's going on. The point in this is that people who have to prove they attended conferences, courses, etc., are able to store a secret on their phone with which they can prove they were present at the conference. We're working with Bluetooth, and the point is that at the event, a phone will act as a beacon to transmit a secret which the attendee will collect in his phone. And only if you have been at that conference or at that event, then you know the secret. It will also be possible to work with a QR code. So you can work with online events. Then there will be a QR code on the screen, which you can scan. And then you prove that you have seen that presentation. And afterwards, the organizer will close the event. So nobody else can use that QR code or that Bluetooth beacon key. And with the information stored on your phone, a verifier, somebody, your boss, the tax department, or anybody else, can use a QR code from your phone to look up if you were present, if your code was present at that conference. With that said, do you have any questions about this project? Or I will go to the next presentations about encryption. Okay, I don't see any questions. I see Ella asking the time. Oh, Jeroen is already answering that. Okay, then I will go to my presentation about encryption. Encryption is a very broad spectrum, right? There are university degrees you can get on mathematics and encryption. So I will have I'll have a disclaimer that by the end of my presentation, you will not be a professor in encryption, but I will show you a few things. I will give you lots of information. So you will have a little bit of insight in what encryption is, what it does, how it works, the history of encryption. It is a very interesting topic, and I hope you will enjoy it. Let me see. I will switch over to my presentation like this. Okay. I will talk about the what, how, why, and the history of encryption. And roughly, encryption is applicable to 4 fields. The encryption itself, encryption of data, hashing of data, using encryption to generate digital signatures, and use encryption to store passwords, password hashing, without really storing the exact information. Let me go to the next slide. So we'll start with the what. There are lots of definitions what encryption is. And I would roughly say that encryption is a way to make information unreadable for other people, right? I have information which I have to transmit over an open network, and everybody can see that. And there, right at the start, we have the application for blockchain. If you're on a public mainnet, blockchain is transparent. Everybody can see all the transactions. So you have to find a way to keep your information covered up, although it's on a public network. So here you see 3 definitions, and they all talk roughly about the same. How do I make my information unreadable for other people? Why would I do that? Well, it's pretty obvious, I think. The most important reasons are privacy, safety, data integrity, freedom, right? Chai is going to talk about freedom of speech. Well, here you have it. And I know there are people who say, well, I don't need to hide anything from my data, from my private life, because I've done nothing wrong, right? But that doesn't add up. Everybody has all kinds of things to hide. And there's a nice Dutch book. I will show you the cover. And it's called You Do Have Something to Hide. And especially in the blockchain space, that's a very big application. We use encryption every day without even realizing it. We use encryption when we go online and use secured web pages. There's a lot of encryption involved. We use encryption at online banking. There's a lot of even more encryption involved. So we use it for sending data, login screens, e-commerce, etc. And we use encryption for storing data. On our hard drive, on our phone, information needs to be encrypted. It protects our data for unknown attackers. And here you see a few of the applications: telebanking, login screens, a device where you can put in a PIN code, which is a digital signature for banking. Here you see cloud services that use encryption. So Dropbox, OneDrive, Google Drives, etc. They all need to store information in a safe way, and encryption is a big part of that. But how did encryption come to life? And you might believe it or not, but encryption is a few thousand years old. One of the first mentioning of encryption is from the time of Julius Caesar. It's a very famous part in history where he used an encryption to send signals to his generals. And he encrypted these messages so other enemies could not read the information, the commands he sent to his generals, and that's how he conquered the world. I will tell you how that works in a moment, because it's a nice start, a nice introduction into encryption. This is another event and another machine that played a very big role in where we are now. It's the Enigma machine, which was used in World War II. And the German command used it to send encrypted information to their submarines, the navy, their armies abroad, going to Russia, etc. And the Enigma machine encrypted all these messages and was played a very big role. And this man here right beneath me, Alan Turing, a very famous Englishman, was able to crack the code And that was a very decisive moment in the history of the war, because now England was able to evade the submarines that were making big explosions all around the island, and providing all these trade ships, with problems, so they could not get all the goods to England. There's a very nice movie about this Enigma machine. It's called The Imitation Game. If you want to look it up, it was a very, very nice movie. And if you want to see how the Enigma machine works, just go on YouTube and look for Enigma machine number file. They have a few very nice documentaries about this machine. Okay, how does encryption work? Well, encryption, to work with encryption, you always have two parts. You need a lock and you need a key, right? And here you see a picture of a physical lock and a key, but in computer terms, the lock is an algorithm, a method, and the key is a parameter, a secret, a password, right? And now in the digital age, we don't have to use these kind of brass locks, but that's only a few decades now. The biggest advancements in encryption have been made in the last 50 years because we invented computers. And there are many different locks, many different algorithms that you can use to encrypt information. Right? And here you see a few of them. I also wrote down when they were invented, and also wrote down when they were broken, because a number of them already are history. You should not use them, only use them to decrypt information, but not encrypt information. On the bottom, you see the name of the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST. And this is the institute that does a lot of research after encryption, and they decide which of the current encryption methods is going to be the new standard. You've all heard about SHA-256. NIST decides which algorithm is used for SHA, the secure hash algorithm. Luckily, I found a very nice small movie of Mia, who works for the NSA. And she's going to tell you how encryption really works. And I'm going to start that now. Let me see. Mia.
Hi, my name is Mia Gill-Epner. I'm majoring in computer science at UC Berkeley, and I work for the Department of Defense, where I try to keep information safe. The internet is an open and public system. We all send and receive information over shared wires and connections. But even though it's an open system, we still exchange a lot of private data. Things like credit card numbers, bank information, passwords, and emails. So how is all this private stuff kept secret? Data of any kind can be kept secret through a process known as encryption, the scrambling or changing of the message to hide the original text. Now, decryption is the process of unscrambling that message to make it readable. This is a simple idea, and people have been doing it for centuries. One of the first well-known methods of encryption was Caesar's cipher, named after Julius Caesar, a Roman general who encrypted his military commands to make sure that if a message was intercepted by enemies, they wouldn't be able to read it. Caesar's cipher is an algorithm that substitutes each letter in the original message with a letter a certain number of steps down the alphabet. If the number is something only the sender and receiver know, then it's called the key. It allows the reader to unlock the secret message. For example, if your original message is hello, then using the Caesar cipher algorithm with a key of 5, the encrypted message would be this. To decrypt the message, the recipient would simply use the key to reverse the process. But there's a big problem with Caesar's cipher. Anybody can easily break or crack the encrypted message by trying every possible key. In the English alphabet, there are only 26 letters, which means you'd only need to try at most 26 keys to decrypt the message. Now, trying 26 possible keys isn't very hard. It would take at most an hour to do. So let's make it harder. Instead of shifting every letter by the same amount, let's shift each letter by a different amount. In this example, a 10-digit key shows how many positions each successive letter will be changed to encrypt a longer message. Guessing this key would be really hard. Using 10-digit encryption, there could be 10 billion possible key solutions. Obviously, that's more than any human could ever solve. It would take many centuries. But an average computer today would take just a few seconds to try all 10 billion possibilities. So in a modern world, where the bad guys are armed with computers instead of pencils, how can you encrypt messages so securely that they're too hard to crack? Now, too hard means that there are too many possibilities to compute in a reasonable amount of time. Today's secure communications are encrypted using 256-bit keys. That means a bad guy's computer that intercepts your message would need to try this many possible options until they discover the key and crack the message. Even if you had 100,000 supercomputers and each of them was able to try 1,000,000 billion keys every second, it would take trillions of trillions of trillions of years to try every option, just to crack a single message protected with 256-bit encryption. Of course, computer chips get twice as fast and half the size every year or so. If that pace of exponential progress continues, today's impossible problems will be solvable just a few hundred years in the future, and 256 bits won't be enough to be safe. In fact, we've already had to increase the standard key length to keep up with the speed of computers. The good news is, using a longer key doesn't make encrypting messages much harder, but it exponentially increases the number of guesses that it would take to crack a cipher. When the sender and the receiver share the same key to scramble and unscramble a message, it's called symmetric encryption. With symmetric encryption, like Caesar's cipher, the secret key has to be agreed on ahead of time by two people in private. So that's great for people, but the internet is open and public, so it's impossible for two computers to meet in private to agree on a secret key. Instead, computers use asymmetric keys, a public key that can be exchanged with anybody and a private key that is not shared. The public key is used to encrypt data, and anybody can use it to create a secret message. But the secret can only be decrypted by a computer with access to the private key. How this works is with some math that we won't get into right now. Think of it this way. Imagine that you have a personal mailbox where anybody can deposit mail, but they need a key to do it. Now, you could make many copies of the deposit key and send one to your friend, or even just make it publicly available. Your friend, or even a stranger, can use the public key to access your deposit slot and drop a message in. But only you can open the mailbox with your private key to access all of the secret messages you've received. And you can send a secure message back to your friend by using the public deposit key to their mailbox. This way, people can exchange secure messages without ever needing to agree on a private key. Public key cryptography is the foundation of all secure messaging on the open internet, including the security protocols known as SSL and TLS, which protect us when we're browsing the web. Your computer uses this today anytime you see the little lock or the letters HTTPS in your browser's address bar. This means your computer is using public key encryption to exchange data securely with the website you're on. As more and more people get on the internet, more and more private data will be transmitted, and the need to secure that data will be even more important. And as computers become faster and faster, we'll have to develop new ways to make encryption too hard for computers to break. This is what I do with my work, and it's always changing.
Well, I think Mia has a very interesting job solving all these mathematical puzzles to keep data safe. Well, she talked about Caesar cipher, and she explained how it is shifted. But I want to stay with our analogy. So the lock method is Caesar cipher, and the key was +3 or +5 or whatever. And you shift to the left or to the right to encrypt or to decrypt. Here I did that with a BlockchainLab Drenthe demo message. I shifted it 8 to the right, and on the bottom you can see that it is etc. Something unreadable. This is of course a very primitive way of encryption, but hey, it was 2,000 years ago. It worked. Let me go into how you would crack this. In general, to crack encryption, there are 2 ways. One is brute force, right? You check every combination, and with Caesar cipher, there are only 26 combinations you can use. So any army scout would be able in half an hour to decode the information. So I don't see the problem. But brute force means big computers trying out trillions of combinations to find the key that fits the lock. But like Mia said, it could take trillions of years. Yeah, or you have to be lucky. The other way to crack encryption is cryptanalysis. And cryptanalysis is looking at the data in a very intelligent way to find a data leak and to make the search field smaller. So you don't have to calculate a trillion years, but maybe only 10 years or 10 weeks, right? If we look at Caesar cipher, there was 800 years later, Mr. Al-Kindi, who had enlightenment. Every language has its own spectrum, its frequency spectrum, right? In the English language, the most used letter, most used character is E, like echo, right? And so you see on the left side a graph where you can see for the English language what the frequency is that letters exist in a text. Now, if you would take an encrypted a Caesar cipher encrypted message and you would do the same frequency analysis, then you will see a shift. You would see the same peaks and troughs, but only 3, 5, or 9 characters shifted to the right or to the left. So if you look at the graph on the right, you can see that the key that was used was +3 because the whole graph shifted 3. That is cryptanalysis, right? You obtain information in a different way than brute force, and you find a way to crack the encryption. Now, Caesar cipher and shifting every character in the same amount was very primitive, like I said. Another good way to prevent this frequency analysis tool is to shift with different keys. Every letter a different key. So you can use a word. I did that here on the screen. You see this is a demo for the meetup of BlockchainLab Drenthe. And I encrypted with the word consensus. And then you get the second message which you see on your screen. Under that message, you see the frequency analysis. So now you cannot use that shift trick and you cannot find new peaks and troughs. Right? And if the word is long enough, it will be very time consuming and very expensive to find the key that without knowing other information. But you have to make that key long enough. And you have to make that key unpredictable. random, and humans suck at random. We are very bad. We are not very creative. And if you look at the statistics of passwords, every year the top 25 passwords are published, and the most popular is still 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And if you go into count, then the top 25 passwords are used in 50% of all passwords. So people are, I'm sorry, stupid and use very bad and very short passwords, and they're easy to crack. On the left side, you see a table where you can look up how long your password is, and if it consists only of characters or characters and numbers and uppercase, how long it would take, right? I used to have a password with 6 and numbers and letters. It would take 3 minutes. So now I'm working with a password with 10, and it would take 1 year to crack it. But computers get faster, so I might need to upgrade my password. What is very important is entropy, the lack of order in my password, right? Because if I would make a password of 10, 15 characters, but it would be 2 or 3 words, then an attacker would use a dictionary attack, right? We are very bad at using random letters, so to memorize it, we just use a few words, right? A password like something else 1, 2, 3. Well, that something else is only 2 words. And when you do a dictionary attack, they will find out very fast. That will not take a few minutes. Mia already talked about 2 ways of encryption. One is symmetric encryption, where you have one key with what you encrypt and the same key which you use for decryption. But it's unsafe, very primitive. So in 1983, RSA was invented, and that is a public-private key method. You use one key to encrypt the message, and you use another key to decrypt the message. I have a small movie for you where it is explained how that works.
In a classic example, Alice wants to send Bob a message. Eve, however, is eavesdropping on them and intercepting their communications. So how can Alice and Bob communicate without having their convo heard? Alice and Bob decide to use public key encryption. In this scheme, Alice and Bob each have 2 sets of keys, a public one, which everyone can see and access, and a private one, which they must keep secret at all times. Data encrypted with a public key can only be opened using a private key, and data encrypted with a private key can only be opened with a public key. Alice uses Bob's public key to encrypt her message. Now, only Bob's private key can open the message. Bob receives it and uses the private key to open it. But how can Bob be sure that Alice really sent the message? Instead, Alice will use Bob's public key and her private key to encrypt the message. Bob must use Alice's public key and then his private key to open the message and verify that it is really from her. Eve, all the while, cannot see the message because she does not have anyone's secret keys.
So that's how public and private key encryption works. Now, these public and private keys, these are connected with each other. So everybody generates a big random number, a really, really big random number. And the private key and the public key are derived from that. Now, you give everybody your public key, because with your public key, you can only encrypt messages. So somebody who wants to send you a message can use your public key to encrypt it, send the message over an open network, and you use your private key to decrypt it. Hashes, right? Those are the second application of encryption. Hashes are one-way functions where you have encryption, which you can decrypt. A hash, when you encrypt, is impossible to decrypt. It's a one-way function. And it's a very important one-way function because it's at the heart of blockchain. It's the function which is used by miners to calculate a hash of a block for which they are rewarded. And then the hash of that block is entered in the next block. So if anyone would alter the block previous, then it would show up and everybody would know that there has been tampered with the blockchain. So they are at the heart. That function, the hash function, is what makes the blockchain immutable. But there are many different hash functions. And as you can see, I have a message there, BlockchainLab Drenthe, which I hashed with SHA-1, SHA-256, and SHA-3. And they have different outcome. And as you can see, the keys get longer because SHA-1 is a key of 160 bits, which is considered unsafe. It's broken. If you would use SHA-1 on, for instance, a document like a PDF, then I could alter the PDF and change something in the header of the PDF and calculate a hash with a new outcome and alter the header again. And I would try that over and over again until I find, let's say, a key which is in the header of the PDF, which generates the same hash. I saw a calculation on the internet where somebody calculated that it would take around $10,000 and 2 weeks of work with a lot of Amazon servers, but you can do it with SHA-1. That was noted a long time ago. So NIST, the Standard Institute, they decided to introduce SHA-2, which is now SHA-256. That's the current standard. The key is 256 bits, a lot safer. And if you want to do that now, you will have to calculate a trillion years to find a hash that is the same. But still, there is a possibility. No, SHA-2 will be cracked, right? We'll have faster computers in the future, and if not now, then maybe in 50 or 100 years, it will be cracked. So NIST already selected SHA-3, which is the backup plan for when SHA-2 is cracked. And you can also see that there. SHA-3 or 384, also called Ketchuk 384, is the algorithm which is used by IOTA. It's considered quantum resistant, quantum proof. So it has a much longer key, and it would take a longer time to crack than SHA-256. What are the characteristics of a hash? You can see that on the bottom half. I took the same SHA-256 algorithm and took the message BlockchainLab Drenthe and calculated the hash. Then I changed one tiny thing. Right? The second BlockchainLab Drenthe you see there is changed a little. I used the L Lima from BlockchainLab in lowercase, and I calculated the hash again. And what you can see is that the hash changed totally. One character changed a little, and it has a dramatical effect on the hash. It is totally different. And that's one of the characteristics to make these changes very easy to detect. Now, here you have a link, and I use that link often to show people how a hash is calculated. I will put that link in the description of our YouTube movie, so you can experiment with that yourself. There are lots of aspects on a hash. You could make a very, very safe hash algorithm which takes minutes to calculate. So when you would use a brute force algorithm, it would take you really, really long time to find all the combinations, but it would be very impractical. If it would take minutes to calculate a hash, and you would go online to a safe website, or you would want to communicate with your bank, it would also take minutes per hash. That's very impractical. On the other side, if you would make a hashing algorithm which is very fast, then that brute force time of 1 trillion years would decrease very rapidly. So you want an algorithm which is not too slow and not too fast. Okay, the third aspect of encryption, the third application is digital signatures. We all know handwritten signatures and how they work and how easily they can be forged. That's totally different with digital signatures. It's related to the public and private key algorithms, where you use your private key to sign a message, and somebody could then use the public key to see if it was really you. So there are three aspects where you use digital signatures for. The first one is authentication. If the message was really sent by the identity that claims to have sent the message. That's one. The second one is non-repudiation. So if I receive a message which is signed by the key from Jeroen, then he cannot deny that he was the one that sent it. Or he gave his key to somebody else, or it was stolen. But normally you have to keep your private key safe. And if it is signed with his private key, he cannot deny he was the one that sent it. And the third thing is integrity, data integrity. So when the signature holds up, then you not only know that Jeroen sent it, but also that it was not altered on the way to me. It was not altered in transit. So digital signatures are a very important function of encryption. And I have a small movie where that is explained. Let me get my...
This is Carol, and this is Bob. Bob's a builder. Carol has a leaky roof, and she asks Bob to fix it. Carol agrees to pay Bob £1,000 to fix her roof. Bob agrees to start work on Monday and have it finished by Wednesday. Carol writes details of the agreement on a piece of paper, and she signs it, and she sends it to Bob in the post. No computers here. Bob signs the piece of paper and sends a copy back to Carol in the post. Carol sends Bob the money. Bob writes a note to Carol to say he's got the money. He signs this receipt and he sends it to Carol in the post. On Monday, Bob doesn't turn up. He's gone on holiday for a week to spend the money. On Thursday, it rains all day and all of Carol's furniture is destroyed. Poor Carol. Carol says it's Bob's fault, but Bob denies ever having agreed to do the work. Carol takes Bob to court. The judge looks at the contract and the receipt which Bob signed. Bob is ordered to pay the money back to Carol and to give her some more money for new furniture. And Bob is sent to jail, where he belongs. Once upon a time, not so long ago, if you wanted proof that a document was sent to you by a particular person, it needed a handwritten signature on it. Only written signatures were legally binding. But these days, it's possible to put a digital signature on a document. This is Jack, and this is Jill. Jack wants to send a document to Jill by email. No paper this time. Now let's be clear, there's nothing secret about the document. Neither of them care if somebody else reads it. Jill just wants to be sure that it definitely came from Jack and that nobody else has made any changes to it on the way. Before his document is sent, some software on Jack's computer prepares the digital signature. The purpose of this software is to create something called a hash of the document. These days, most computers do this using an algorithm called SHA-256, which was invented by the USA's National Security Agency. SHA-256 takes a copy of the document text and subjects it to a sequence of complex mathematical calculations and other transformations. Remember, as far as the computer is concerned, the document consists of binary ones and zeros. The result is called a hash value. It's also referred to as a digest of the document. The hashing process has been designed so that even the tiniest difference in the original document would result in a completely different hash value. This part of the signing process is not encryption, because the transformations done by SHA-256 are practically impossible to reverse. You can't take a hash value and use it to work out what was in the original document. Like baking a cake, hashing is a one-way process. But if you were to apply the same process to the same document, you would get exactly the same hash. Some software on Jack's computer now encrypts the hash using Jack's private key. And the encrypted hash is embedded in the original document. The document now has a digital signature. Jack sends Jill a copy of the signed document. He also sends her a copy of the public key. Alternatively, he can put the public key on a website for Jill to go and fetch. Jill's computer decrypts the digital signature using Jack's public key. If she can decrypt it, she knows it came from Jack. Jill's computer then uses SHA-256 to calculate the hash value again, using the text of the document. If the hash value that Jill's computer calculates is the same as the hash value that was sent by Jack, she can be pretty sure that it hasn't been tampered with since it was created. Remember, Jack and Jill really don't care if someone else has seen the signed document. It's not a secret. And it doesn't matter if someone else gets a hold of Jack's public key. Jill simply wants to be sure that the document was sent by Jack.
So to be sure, absolutely sure, you use a hash function to verify the integrity of the data. Am I sure that nobody even changed one period? A hash tells me that. And you use public key encryption to verify the message is really coming from the other person that told you he was sending it. Okay, last item, key derivation. That's password hashing. Imagine you have a server where you have some credentials, some information, you have to log in. And you have to use a password. How does that work? Does the server store your password? So the next time when you come to that server, you type in the password again, he can look at the stored password and compare it with the password you typed in. That would be a very bad idea. Because all these passwords stored on that server are waiting to be hacked. So a better idea would be is not to store the passwords, but store a hash of the password. So when the first time is there that I log in to that server, I type in my password and the hash of my password is stored. The next time I log into that server, I type in my password on my machine. The hash is transmitted compared with the hash that is stored. Are they equal? Then I can enter. A much better way, if the server is hacked, they only have a login and a hash. If you use it well. Because if you use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 as your password, the attacker will use a dictionary attack and has 100,000 hashes, and I will hash 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and compare the hash that comes out with all these 100,000 different people whose credentials are stored, and he will find at least 10 or 20 of them that will use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 as the password. So use long passwords with enough entropy. That will make the attack useless. Okay, that was the last application that I was going to enlighten you. There must be a few questions. I put a few questions on the screen. The most heard questions are, does encrypting make data safe? Only when you use a strong encryption algorithm, a good lock, in combination with a strong password. If I use an old encryption method with a very weak password, then encryption is worthless. Is storing data on the blockchain safe? Because people say, well, data on the blockchain is cryptographically safe. No. Information stored on the blockchain on a public mainnet can be read by anyone, right? On Ethereum, you store hashes. On IOTA, you can store even more data, a few kilobytes in one transaction. But anyone can read that information. If you go to a website with a block explorer, they can read all your information. So it's very wise to encrypt your information in a strong way before you store it on the blockchain. So does make storing information on a blockchain, does it make the data safe? Absolutely not. Is storing only a hash of my data on the public blockchain safe? Well, I already answered that a little bit, because if you would only have a few possibilities, let's say we are at the moment 20 people watching this stream. If I would put all your names on the blockchain, but I would not store them in plain text, I would only store a hash of your name. Would that be safe? Only in theory, because if somebody would look at this chat window and I would take the name Jeroen Wester, I would hash that and I would go and look on the blockchain. If that same hash exists, then I would know Jeroen Wester was there. Or Wietse, or Isra, or Renske. The possibilities are only few which they have to test. So is storing a hash of information on a blockchain safe? Not by default. An attacker must be unable to guess what data is being stored with enough entropy. Otherwise, it would be a few minutes before cracking it. Now, last question, which is asked a lot. Will quantum computing break all encryption? Quantum computing are super fast computers. They will. There's an estimation that they will function 180 million times faster in calculating a hash. Now brute forcing a very large number of possibilities would take a trillion years, and then it would be 180 million times faster. So yes, it would. Some algorithms would be easy to crack. but there are already quantum-resistant encryption methods. And IOTA, for instance, with that Ketchak 384, they use an algorithm, a lock, which is very hard to crack, even for a quantum computer. The algorithm which is used will not be 180 million times faster, only 80 times faster. Then 1 trillion years divided by 80 is still a long time. So relatively safe. Okay, that's all for this presentation. Are there any questions I have to answer? I'm looking at the chat right now. There is a question about the attendance certificate. I will answer that later on. Okay, then I will go to the next part.
Maneuvers in an environment like Cambodia. My name is Shailin. We were Khmer refugees, and so I was actually born in a refugee camp in Thailand, but then in 1991 we were allowed to move to the Netherlands, so I more or less grew up in the Netherlands. I have a background in philosophy and economics. Thereafter I started software programming. Sorry, can you guys hear me?
The sound is okay.
Okay. After that, I started working as a technical specialist at the payment service provider called EMS, which is a daughter company of ABN AMRO Bank. I learned a lot about payment systems. And after that, I started working on Serey.io. And the main goal of Serey.io initially was to improve freedom of expression. Oh, and by the way, right now I'm also teaching at the local university called Saxon University. And we have recently published a book, a blockchain book. I'm willing to give the ebook for you for free. So what I will do is I will write down my email address in the YouTube in the YouTube chat channel, so that if you're interested in the book, please send me an email and you get a free ebook from me. Okay. So now shortly about my personal philosophy. I believe that blockchain is a social, political, and economic revolution, not just a technical revolution. Blockchain, in its core, I think, decentralizes power into the hands of the masses, and it prevents network corruption. Now, in old computer networks, where you have, for example, one node that's controlled by one administrator, this administrator has a lot of power over who can log in, who can create passwords, who can get access to the services. With blockchain technology, you are eliminating this one administrator. In that sense, you prevent network corruption. And my goal, this is my motto, I would like to use blockchain to decentralize power and to protect life, liberty, and property. It sounds very noble, but I hope that at the end of this presentation, you will understand what I mean by that. So now I would look into some issues that's plaguing the developing countries. First, a definition of what a developing country is. Well, a developing country is defined by Oxford Languages as a poor agricultural country that is seeking to become more advanced economically and socially. A second definition, this is from Wikipedia, is a country with a less developed industrial base and the low Human Development Index relative to other countries. So if you look at many developing countries, they share the following attributes. First of all, the very weak rule of law, the very poor banking infrastructure, and some, actually most of the developing countries, but you also see this happening in already developed countries, is that governments are penalizing freedom of expression. I don't know if you have followed the situation around Hong Kong at this moment, but in Hong Kong, they are having a new law that if you boo the national anthem of China, that you can be arrested and be put in jail. This is not only a problem in developing countries, but also in an already developed country like Hong Kong. However, such problems also give birth to opportunities. I believe that a lot of people in developing countries, they have a strong desire for progress, and they possess the willingness to try out new things. And the big question here is, how can we use blockchain technology to improve the above? Or how can we use it to improve the rule of law, better banking infrastructure, and freedom of expression? You need to understand that at this moment, I'm only talking about 3 issues, but of course there are many, many more issues in developing countries, like environmental problems, wage inequality between men and women, discrimination, racism. But for now, we only focus on these 3 issues. Maybe some of you may not know where Cambodia is. That's why I put the slide in here. Cambodia is at the heart of Southeast Asia. It's bordering Vietnam and Thailand. And I think a lot of people know Cambodia for its beautiful, majestic temples, the Angkor Wat temples. So now let's take a look at Cambodia. So Cambodia has a population of 16.60 million people. Most of the people still live in the rural areas, around 80%. There are 21 million connected mobile phones. And they have a lot of internet users, actually. Almost 10 million out of 16 million are internet users in Cambodia. And almost 10 million people have access to social media. A lot of people, when they think about developing countries, like for example Cambodia, they think that Cambodia is a very poor country, it's always very dusty. What I would like to show you is that the view that a lot of people have of Cambodia is oftentimes wrong. The view that they have of Cambodia is Cambodia like 20 years ago or 10 years ago. Cambodia is developing extremely quick. Modern Cambodia is getting much richer. So we can, for example, see that from 2012 to 2017, the middle class has grown a lot. So the people who are earning more than 800 USD has almost doubled between 2012 and 2017. People who earn more than 400 USD has also more or less doubled in just 5 years' time. And Cambodian people are also getting more and more familiar with banking services. 12% of the people in 2017, they were already familiar with domestic money transfers, and 3% with international money transfers. However, still 78% is unbanked. Modern Cambodia is very connected. Like what I said before, that we have a large mobile penetration rates. And data is incredibly cheap in Cambodia. For just 1 USD, you can get 10 GB of data. That's much cheaper than what we, for example, have in the Netherlands. And modern Cambodia is very addicted to Facebook. Facebook in 2017 had little over 4 million users, but then in 2019, it almost doubled to 8.8 million users. The thing about Facebook is that people use it and they see it as a means to play. When we talk about Facebook, we always say, I will use Facebook. But if a Cambodian talks about Facebook, they don't say, I use Facebook, but they say, I play Facebook. So Facebook is seen as a playful thing, something that they play with, like a game. Something else that is interesting about Cambodian people is that most of the news they get about the outside world is coming from Facebook. We have realized after a few months of launching Serey that Cambodian people are not really aware of how to use Google or how to use a browser. They only use a mobile phone, they install Facebook on it, and they think Facebook is the internet. I can laugh about it, but I also think it's a bit tragic. The reason why is that because when people post things on Facebook, they mostly post fairly shallow, short posts. And this is something that we would like to change with Serey. Anyways, Cambodian people are addicted to Facebook. Facebook provides information about the rest of the world, also information about Cambodia. It's a self-elevation tool. It is used for information about events and entertainment. They also use Facebook a lot as an e-commerce tool. So they sell the products on Facebook. And they use it as an opportunity to engage and talk with friends. And modern Cambodia is more progressive and more confident. There are many opportunities for blockchain in Cambodia. The thing about developing countries is that they can skip legacy technology. Like in the Netherlands, we usually have house telephone, a fixed telephone network. But in Cambodia, they never really built it. Instead, they jumped to mobile phones. Cambodia now has very poor banking infrastructure, but I think it also provides an opportunity to skip legacy infrastructure and immediately move to a more advanced infrastructure that is built on the blockchain, for example. This is actually something that the Cambodian National Bank is experimenting with. So somewhere in this year, sometime in this year, Cambodia will release its own central bank digital currency. It's a central bank cryptocurrency. If they will release it this year already, I think they're taking a huge leap forward, and they may be earlier. They may be earlier in doing this than the Eurozone. However, crypto trading without a license is illegal in Cambodia. This is something you see a lot in Cambodia. Is that if they say that something is illegal, it does not necessarily mean that they will also enforce the law or enforce the rule. So in Cambodia, I know a lot of people who are trading. I'm sure of high officials within Cambodia, like the sons of the prime minister in Cambodia, who's also trading in cryptocurrencies, even though they don't say it. If you believe that cryptocurrency will be inevitable in Cambodia, and that people will eventually start allowing Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, this gives you the opportunity to start developing a wallet already. And that is something that we have done with Serey. So with Serey, we have built a Serey wallet. And in the wallet, you can store your Serey coins, but also Bitcoin, soon also Ethereum, Cardano, and many other cryptocurrencies. But because we know it is illegal, we try to keep it a little bit under the hood. But in case the government says, okay, from now on you can start trading, we will be the first within Cambodia who will have a fully functional wallet. If you look at Cambodia and penalizing freedom of expression, several years ago, the Cambodian government has told the Cambodia Daily that they had to close down. They had to close down because they were posting or they were writing articles that were putting the government in a negative spotlight. So from one day to the other, they said, "Oh, you from the Cambodia Daily, you forgot to pay us 5 million USD in taxes." Of course, the Cambodia Daily were not able to pay this, and then they had to close down. This hurt me a lot. So then I decided to create a social blogging platform. And for the social blogging platform, we use our own blockchain, which is called the Serey blockchain. If you send transactions with Bitcoin, the transactions are stored on the Bitcoin blockchain. And what's nice is that it is public. Everyone can see that transactions have been made, and no one can remove or they can censor the transaction. We use the Serey blockchain not to store financial transactions, but we use it to store posts or a blog. So you can, for example, go to serey.io. You can write your own post. When you click on submit, the post is stored on the blockchain, and there's no one, even not us, who can censor your content or who can remove the content. This is how we're trying to promote freedom of expression. But again, because we are operating in Cambodia, this is not something that we like to say out very loudly. So this is one of our core principles that we try to promote in Cambodia without expressing it too loudly. What's also very nice about the Serey blockchain, and it's a fork of Steemit. I don't know whether there are people here who know Steemit, but it also makes use of a ranking mechanism that if you upvote a post or if you like a post, then the post will become more visible. So a post that's very popular and that's liked a lot will get higher in the ranking. Therefore, it gains more visibility, and in return, you also receive Serey rewards. So there's some kind of gamification within this mechanism. So I would like to summarize a few practical things that I've learned from being active in Cambodia. Cambodians are willing to embrace new technologies, but a lot of education is still needed. Like what I said before, Cambodian people are still not used to use a browser. Most of the connections on the internet happen via mobile phone. So it has taught us to develop mobile applications and keep the applications as simple as possible. We don't want users to log in with a private key. So what we did is we let them log in for the first time with a private key, but after that, they can create a password. And for the consecutive times that they log in again, they only need to use their own password. And we also implemented two-factor authentication. So you can connect it to your Google Authenticator, or you can also connect it to your fingerprint identity. Cambodia can greatly benefit from blockchain, but you have to be a little bit careful when you are promoting blockchain, especially when you are trying to give services related to cryptocurrencies. So a lot of the things that we are doing, we are also doing a little bit under the hood. We don't promote some services too much, but it is there. Just in case Cambodia says that cryptocurrencies are allowed, then we will be the first on the market. So keep in mind that regulations are unclear and not always enforced. So even though it is illegal to trade in cryptocurrencies, no one has ever been arrested for trading cryptocurrencies. The police will not do anything about it. We have made the explicit moral choice to continue experimenting. And we know that's important to work under the radar as necessary, but never to forget our principles. And our principle is to store posts on the blockchain in order to promote freedom of expression. Okay? We believe that blockchain is inevitable. So by continue experimenting, by creating services, even though we don't promote all of our services, we will be ready if everything becomes legal. But next to the blockchain platform, you can also build many other applications on the blockchain. So you can also store advertisements or marketplace postings. You can also create something like Quora, a Q&A system. So whenever someone asks a question, you can store the question on the blockchain and you can store the answer on the blockchain. So you will create a very transparent way of Q&A. Yeah, we also created a wallet. We also created a lottery. So if you think about the blockchain is actually nothing else but a database. And around this database, you can build a lot of different services. In this case, these are the services that we are developing. One other service that we provide is our own decentralized exchange. The reason why we chose for decentralized exchange is that it provides more security, and because we don't run our own decentralized exchange, because there are many nodes who are running this, it is impossible to close down. In this sense, it promotes freedom of economic activity. This, in short, is my presentation about Serey.
I want to thank our distinguished speakers, Jeroen Wester and Chai, for contributing to our meetup. I think I learned a lot. I was very impressed how an Asian country, which was, let's say, a few years back, is working on overtaking us. And like I said, that's the real meaning of the quote, "We're living in interesting times." I want to tell you when our next meetup is, and that will be on here, June 18th. And we will have some more interesting speakers. And for now, I want to thank you for participating. And if you follow the link in the chat and the link that I put up here, then we will go there and talk with you some more. And it will be probably a bit easier to ask more complex questions. So I would want to say that this is 1 hour and 46 minutes now, and that is a quite long time to be sitting behind a screen and listening to all kinds of interesting speakers. But I hope to see you again. Thank you.